Greetings, Professor. Today, my group, Gaetan, Christian, Mariano, Sheila, and Ayuval Attention will talk about hypothesis formulation. But first, we need to know what is a hypothesis. A hypothesis is basically an educated guess or a prediction of how our research or study will end. It's based on observations we have made before, and also it has elements like variables that can be independent, meaning that they can be changed by the researcher, or dependent, where we can only observe. That means that we cannot change them but observe them. So it is a tentative answer to your research question that has yet been tested, not been tested. So either way, a hypothesis can be right or wrong depending on the research. That's the reason we are doing a study, to prove it right or wrong. Also, there are some types of hypotheses that I'm going to describe briefly. A simple hypothesis shows a relationship between an independent variable and a dependent variable. With a complex hypothesis, we have a relationship between two independent variables and a dependent variable. With a null hypothesis, there's no relationship between variables. Then, with an alternative hypothesis, we use it in conjunction with a null hypothesis, and we use it. The alternative hypothesis is to prove that the is completely opposite to the null hypothesis, and is to prove that is wrong, and only one should remain true or right. With a logical hypothesis, we use or suggest relationship between variables, but only based on our reasoning or observations without the lack of data. With empirical hypothesis, then we use, or a working hypothesis is also called, we use concrete data, or we rely on concrete data. With statistical hypothesis, then we are testing a sample, or we are using a sample, let's say, of a population, but we only use a portion of that sample. A good hypothesis contains the following elements: a relation between cause and effect, a testable prediction, and independent and dependent variables. Some good language, we had to write that hypothesis well, as I said, and also a good hypothesis has to be ethical, to follow all the ethical guidelines.
Right now, Sheila speaking. When we are talking about hypothesis, we need to have a strong hypothesis. And with this, we are going to achieve this with some steps. The first step is ask a question. Specific. The research questions must be well defined. Researchable. It must be possible to investigate about the topic. And the relevant, it should address an important gap into the context, into the field of this research study. As step number 2, we have do preliminary research. Explore theories that were formulated previous to your study. Here again, the literature review that is so important, because we are going to recap the information and reorganize what we find about the topic. And identify the variables, because they determine the key relevance and what is the plan for the investigation. As a step number 3, here I have the example of what I am talking about. That is, formulate the hypothesis. With the research questions here as an example, do students who attend more lectures get better exam results? And beginning with these research questions, we are going to formulate the hypothesis, such as attending more lectures leads to better exam results. As an step number 4, here I have refine your hypothesis. How? Being specific, clearly defining all the variables. It must be testable, that ensure that our hypothesis can be verified. It must be directional and measurable. Directional, it predict that we can predict the expected relationship between the variables, and measurable, identifying how the variables are going to be quantified and how we are going to do all the things. Thank you so much.
My name is Chris Aitam, and I'll continue with the steps to formulate a hypothesis. The step 5, phrase your hypothesis. There are 3 ways to phrase the hypothesis. The first one is to identify variables. Here we use if and then. The first part of the sentence is the independent variable, and the second sentence is the dependent variables. For example, if a student starts attending less classes, then he or her grades will get worse. The second one is to differentiate variables. Here we compare 2 groups. For example, students who attended fewer classes will get worse grades than those who attended more classes. The third one is to relate variables. Here we use correlation effect terms, and the number of times a student misses class, it has negative effect. The step number 6 is write a null hypothesis. Here we have to take into account that if we write a null hypothesis, we have to write alternative hypothesis too. Okay, the null hypothesis is represented with the HO, and this type of hypothesis tell us that there is not a relation between the variables. For example, the number of classes that the student attends has no effect in their grades. And on the other hand, the alternative hypothesis, which is represented by H1 or HA, tell us that there is a relationship between the variables and they are connected. For example, the number of classes that the students misses or attends have an effect in their grades. Okay, here we have the activity, what is called froggy jumps. Let's see. Okay, this is hypothesis challenge. Test your knowledge on formulating hypotheses in research. According to what my partner said, for example, what is the step 1 in formulating a hypothesis? Well, the first step is ask a question, number B. Okay, how is the null hypothesis represented? Well, it's represented like HO. What is to formulate a hypothesis? Well, is the letter C. What is a hypothesis? The letter B. testable prediction about the relationship between variables. What is an example or a statement of null hypothesis? The number of classes has no effect because they don't have relationship. What are the three ways to phrase your hypothesis? Well, the three ways are to identify, to differentiate, and to relate. Letter A. Okay, how is the alternative hypothesis represented? Letter B, H1 or HA. And how many steps are involved in formulating a hypothesis? Well, according to my partner and me, there are 6 steps.